based on science.
Hey everyone, Matt Thomas here. Thanks for watching. So this video is about grading for growth and grading for equity. Now before you say, Matt, I know this already. This is standards-based grading, right? It's not in the sense that it's not a pre-packaged structured method of grading, but rather a grading philosophy that allows teachers to take this philosophy and apply it to whatever grading structure they choose to. So if they're more of an A through F teacher or a 4-to-1 or a 1-to-4 teacher, that wouldn't matter. They can apply this philosophy of grading to any grading structure. What it is though is a more natural and authentic grading method that best supports how our students learn at their individual developmental stages, and it better supports a student's learning growth. This grading philosophy will also allow you to better justify your grading practices to students, parents, and administrators because it's something that's very fair, very accurate, very authentic, and very easy to explain to parents and admin and students why you grade the way you do. So to really truly understand the philosophy of grading for growth and grading for equity, we need to know that students go through developmental stages. And at the preteen and teenage years, they aren't very consistent. When a baby's born, the infant, newborn infant and toddler stages, unless there's a developmental issue, those developmental stages are very consistent. Those developmental leaps are very consistent. So a baby by week 5 should all be able to do this, or babies by week 12 or week 30, they should all be able to do this. When it comes to the preteen and teen years, the developmental stages, the developmental levels are so inconsistent. It's just like physical growth. When someone, grows 6 inches within a month, right? That happens developmentally to the preteen and teen years. And again, it's not very consistent. So when someone comes in and says, hey, by 14 years old, all students should be able to master this. A neuroscientist who specializes in developmental stages will go, that's cute that you think so, but that isn't necessarily the case. Knowing that, you're going to have students that come to you at a certain level, developmental level, through no fault of their own, and you're going to have students that come to you at the same age that have a much higher developmental level through no fault of their own, right? And then we also have the environmental factor of maybe a student has more support at home, maybe they had teachers that they connected with more. So knowing that about developmental levels, there's 2 things we have to remember. One is that learning levels and levels of learning are 2 different things. So on the website, I have linked where the learning levels come from, and learning levels would be below basic, proficient, and advanced. So those learning levels come from the National Assessment and Governing Board. It's based on a collective judgments of a representative panel of teachers, education specialists, and members of the general public. Essentially, it's created based on desired outcomes of where we want our students to be. Sometimes, however, those desired outcomes don't align with the student's individual developmental stage or learning developmental stage. And so by knowing that learning levels and levels of learning are 2 different things, it puts education kind of in a different perspective. So a level of learning is where a student starts and how far they grow, right? So if they start at a certain level of learning and you bring your students where you want them to be, right? Now their level of learning has grown. I'm presuming most of the people watching this are educators. And if you are an educator and you got your master's degree, we all know our level of learning didn't stop, right? Once you get your master's, you don't magically know everything, right? And so you're constantly on this level of learning, this projection of growth, if you will. The more you do something, the more you look for more information, the better you get at it. So if we look at our students that way, some will come to us with different levels of learning through no fault of their own. Maybe they don't have support at home. Maybe they didn't have a great connection with the teachers. But for the sake of grading for equity and growth, it's more that their developmental level isn't there yet. And so we take them where they are and we bring them to where we want them to be. We focus on their level of learning and how we can just make their level of learning greater, right, as best as we can. That allows us to take those students, ones that maybe come to us with a developmental level or developmental stage here, and then the ones that come to us with this developmental level stage here. We can work with both of them and grow their level of learning. And we have to understand that learning is not a finish line, right? There's no stop. You've got everything. You now have learned everything. So knowing that, that's very important to know. Knowing that, that sets up our grading for growth and grading for equity, our focus. So you may notice a rough edit here because I'm re-recording a part of the video. I really liked how the rest of the video turned out. There was just one section I didn't feel like I did a great job explaining, so I'm re-recording it. And I'm taking the opportunity to add on to a part that I just finished explaining because there was one thing I didn't think I clarified very well. So if we can just really quickly go back to the learning levels and levels of learning, the reason that I focus so much on learning levels, below basic, proficient, and advanced, versus level of learning is I wanted to make clear that as teachers, we shouldn't limit what we teach based on a student's perceived learning level or what's been identified as their learning level, whether it's below basic, proficient, and advanced. Because the learning levels are like we created those, right? The brain doesn't understand learning levels. It doesn't categorize as a below basic, proficient, and advanced unless you tell the brain that, like, you're this, you're that, and keep harping on it. Then the brain's going to go, I guess I am. The brain understands level of learning, though. The brain knows that if you start here and all of a sudden you're learning a lot more, you've grown in your level of learning. That's really cool. You feel good about yourself. So as a teacher, I want to clarify that as teachers, we shouldn't limit what we teach to our students based on their identified or perceived learning level, because that may not really be accurate. And any neuroscientist will tell you this. Anyone can learn anything we want to teach them. Our students can learn anything we want to teach them as long as we make the information accessible enough. Kindergartners are learning pre-algebra. I've done a video on that. It's all how we make that information accessible enough. So we're taking the students where they are, and we're not assigning and expecting. We're not assigning something just expecting them to master it. We're taking them where they are and side by side, bringing them to where we want them to be, right? Making that information accessible. Just please don't limit what you think your students can do based on their quote unquote learning level. That was something that we put on them. So that I just want to clarify that. So let's get into the part that I am re-recording. Let's get into how we can apply this philosophy of grading for growth and grading for equity. So credit Dr. Tom Schimmer. I got these slides and I got this analogy from him. So he used pancakes as the analogy. So again, this is a grading philosophy that you can apply to any structure you have. For the example on the slides, I used the 4-to-1 grading structure and I used the A through F grading structure. But again, you can apply this however, whatever fits best for you. So his analogy was pancakes. And he said this. He said, you'll have students that will give you exactly what you ask for. No more, no less. And so let's say you have a student that gives you exactly what you ask for. So as an English teacher, like, they gave me the essay, they gave me the structure I wanted, right? But if I make them the ceiling, if I make their grade the ceiling, so that's the A+, then I don't allow room for those students that take it above and beyond. Because we're going to have students that, come in kind of already knowing this information really well. So how can we allow them to take it to the next level, right? How can we allow us to meet them where they are and even make them shine even more? So his suggestion was this, and again, because it's a philosophy, you can adjust this however you'd like. His suggestion was, if you're using, say, a 4-to-1 grading scale, that's your C, right? That's your C. That's your proficient level. There's nothing wrong with what they gave you. If you're doing an A through F grading scale, maybe that's your 93 or 95%, right? So again, using the pancake analogy, if you see the screen here, they made you pancakes. There's nothing wrong with those pancakes. You shouldn't penalize them because they didn't go above and beyond because they gave you what you wanted. But maybe that's not the ceiling. So that's your 95%, your 93%, that's your 3. That allows room for those exemplary students, the ones that go above and beyond, to also have their work valued. And so maybe that's your 4, those exemplary above and beyond students, that's your 100% if it's A through F, or that's your 4. Or you could say, hey guys, if whoever goes above and beyond on this project, I'm going to give you extra credit. So then they know that their work is being valued. And so that being said, the 4 and the 3, right, you still have your A's. The 3 is the proficient. They still earn their A. So then moving on then, if you have your 2. So if you look at the picture, his example was like, you can tell they're pancakes, right? They look like pancakes. They're good. Just there's things that can be, improved upon. They're most of the way there. They're developing. That's a 2 if it's the 4-to-1, or maybe that's your B. That's your 85 or 80%. Right? Still acknowledging their hard work and their value, not penalizing them because you're not comparing them to the exemplary one, right? So that's your 2, that's your B. And then the 1, if you look at the final picture, you look at it and go, yeah, I mean, they're pancakes, right? You know they're pancakes. You can identify it as pancakes. Every aspect needs to be attended to, but they are giving you pancakes. So then that's your C, or that's your 1. If you're looking at it like, well, that's an F, then now you're creating this deficit mindset. And the reality is they did give you pancakes, but now you have a way to improve it, right? Now you have a baseline to improve it. And so that would be the C. That could be the 1. And the example is, an F is obvious, right? An F is a 0. The F is the students didn't give you anything. There's no effort at all. And if you're wondering, well, where's the D? Using the pancake analogy, they came with the ingredients. They didn't put it all together, but they had something that they brought to the table. So maybe that's your D. But you're hoping that the majority is you starting from the C and beyond. And of course, the F is very justifiable because there's nothing there. They didn't give you anything. So that's one way you can apply this. And what it does, let's say you have a student who's always tried and they're doing the best they can for the developmental level that they have right there. If they're always, the teacher's like, that's not, it's not good enough, it's an F or a D, that's going to have that deficit mindset. If a student who's developing is getting a B in class, that will motivate them to continue working, right? You're like, dude, that's pretty good. Let me take you where you're at. Let me make it better. Let's make it better together. You're keeping that growth mindset, allowing the motivation to be there for the continued hard work. So that's a couple ways that you could apply it. And if let's say it's a math class, right? And to be full disclosure, I'm not a math teacher, so I'll do my best. But let's say it's a math lesson where you have a student who's doing a 4-step equation, and maybe they're missing a step, right? So rather than getting an F completely, they're having trouble on that last step. Maybe that's a 2, a B, they're developing, right? You have room for growth. And then just by a few extra little mini lessons, then that can get them to the A. Maybe they've got the first 2 steps there, but they're missing the last 2. Like, hey, they're on their way. Maybe that's your 1. Maybe that's your C, right? It keeps them motivated. And then, of course, you keep working on it through the mini lessons to bring them to that next level. You just don't want the students to give up on their own learning. So one last thing I wanted to talk about before, editing this back into the original video is one important aspect of grading for growth and grading for equity is allowing the students to retake assessments. And that is so very important. So whether it's an essay or a math test, if my students come to me and within the first, let's say I'm a math teacher and my first test, they're just not getting it yet and they don't do well on the test. Maybe a month from now, 2 months from now, the students finally go, dude, I get it. I finally get what you were trying to say in that first unit. Can I please retake that first test? And that's so very important to allow them to do it because they're demonstrating their mastery. Our goal is for them to learn the material, right? And so if they're like, I finally got what you were saying, by allowing them to retake that test and demonstrating their mastery, demonstrating what they know, we're being equitable. Now we're grading them authentically. If I'm having them write an essay and I grade that first essay, the first 2 weeks they're with me, and then, maybe it's not as good as, maybe it's not the best that I hoped it would be, but 2 months later, after me working with them, they're like, I finally get it. Can I rewrite that first essay? Yes, I want them to, because I want them to demonstrate what they know. Then I'll replace that grade. If I were a math class, and this could work with any subject, I just have math in mind, I would use the reteach, retest method, meaning if I gave a test, and let's make this up, let's say there's 20 questions on there, and a student did really well on everything but this one section, let's say probabilities. The student just couldn't get probabilities. What I would do is after the test, the next day, I would get the students in individual groups for sections that they didn't know well, they didn't do well on. Let's say a group of people that didn't do well on probabilities. And I would go around and spend the first few minutes of class reteaching those individual sections, just that mini section. And then the next day to begin class, I'd have them retake just that part of the test. I don't need to have them retake the entire test. They did well in the entire test. I'm just going to have them retake just those few problems and then add that score into their previous test scores. That is equitable. That allows for growth. That allows, essentially, I'm reteaching the part that they didn't do well on and then allowing them to retest to demonstrate their mastery there. Also, by allowing students to turn in late work, it's so very important because at the beginning of the year, some students maybe they've never really done well in class, so they're not motivated to do well. By week 3, they're like, dude, this teacher's great. Like, I really can understand this stuff. And so they start working well with their work. If they come to you and say, hey, can I turn in this late work? If you say no, they're going to see it that you're a barrier in their success for learning. You're blocking their success. We as teachers might go, well, we're teaching responsibility, but the 14-year-old brain wouldn't see it that way. And in reality is maybe they went through a developmental growth spurt and they're like, boom, I finally get the consequences of me not turning in my work. And so allow the students to turn in late work. That is easily justifiable to parents and to admin, to students. And you know, you're, as the teacher, you have control over that. Maybe you allow it, you know, every 6 weeks or up to, you know, every 2 units. It's really up to you. Maybe all the way to the end of the semester. It is a little more work for us to grade them, but our goal at the end of the day is to authentically grade our students and allow them to demonstrate their mastery. So I'm going to rough edit this back into the video and then continue from there. Oh, why the philosophy of grading for growth and grading for equity is so valuable. It assesses a person at their natural developmental stage, right? Where they are, and then I'm going to grow their level of learning. It supports the flow of constant and consistent learning. If we say, no, you can't retake the test. No, you can't turn in that late work. We become the barrier in their learning. That's how they're going to see it. And now we, as a teacher, we may go, well, I'm starting to teach consequence. That's great because us as adults have fully functional frontal lobes. We can understand that part. Developmental stages, a 14-year-old will see it that you're a barrier in their education, and it's going to put them in a deficit mindset. It supports a student's motivation to learn by not allowing grades to be barriers to the learning. It can be easily justified as equitable grading practice when you explain to a parent, hey, yeah, the student didn't do well on Unit 1 test, but now they know the stuff. Yeah, go ahead and retake it. Or yeah, go ahead and, you know, Joey can turn in some late work. It's all good. It's also a very clear and authentic level of academic development. I now get a more accurate way of grading when I allow students to retake things, when I allow students to work on what they need to develop, what they need to work on at the time, and take them from where they are and bring them to where I want them to be. So if you're in a department and you're like, okay, great, how does my department do it? Then ask, like, have a conversation. Where in our curriculum or in our structure can we use grading for growth? Where can we start applying that? And just know at the end of the day, if you focus on grading for equity, you are being authentic, you're being equitable, you are doing a grading practice that supports and aligns with a person's individual developmental growth. Thanks for watching.